What is going on, everybody? It's Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast, and this is the Total Takedown brought to you by Pub Sports Radio. We're talking UFC Vegas 43, and we're going over the card, talking overs and unders on this video. If you want to check out the full card breakdown I did with my special guest, make sure you check that out in the description below. We go through every single fight and we break it down from a betting perspective. I'll also be doing my undefeated post weigh-in show tomorrow morning right after the weigh-ins are completed, and I'll give my final thoughts, so make sure you keep an eye out for that one as well. Let's bust on into this bad boy. First fight of the evening, women's strawweight fight, Luana Pinheiro taking on Sam Page Hughes. Total here is set at 2.5. The over 2.5 looks like about minus 150. The under 2.5 plus 100. This line is kind of jumping around the market. There are a couple of pick'em prices out there where the over is only minus 120 and the under is minus 110. So slightly juiced to the over in this fight, and that's natural for women's MMA. We expect those fights to go over. They don't quite have as much finishing power as the men do, generally speaking, and especially when you get to low-level women's MMA, when they kind of cancel each other out, you end up having a grindy style match. However, this is a fight that I actually would be looking for violence, which kind of explains why this isn't a minus 250 over. Luana Pinheiro is a first-round monster. She's excellent with her jiu-jitsu and her judo. She's aggressive with her striking. She hits hard. So does Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes hits extremely hard. We have seen Sam Hughes finished once by knockout, once by submission. Both those things are on the table from Luana Pinheiro, and what we don't know is how Luana Pinheiro reacts when she's unable to get that finish. I think she's only got 2 decisions her entire UFC career, so if she gasses out the way it looks like she was against Randa Marcos, Sam Hughes may be able to flip the tables on her, and I don't know if she makes it to the judges' scorecards if she does burn herself out early. So I'm kind of looking at violence here for the first fight of the night. Obviously not a very juicy price tag with that plus 110, but if I was going to bet this total, that's the way I'd be looking. Of course, I give a pick on every single fight on the card. Just make sure you understand that I am not necessarily betting every single one of these. So I'll try to mention the ones that I'm actually putting my money behind, but the goal of the show here is to give an opinion on every single fight. Featherweight fight up next, Yayan taking on Sean Soriano. And we've got another total here set at 2.5. Over is minus 125. The under is plus 105. And this is another one where I would be very, very tempted on that under 2.5. Even though you're only getting plus 105 on it, it seems to be the way to go for me. Yayan is solid. I'll just put it that way. Solid, strong grappler, and that's really what's given Sean Soriano trouble in the past. Sean Soriano has strong hips. We've seen a good sprawl from him, but as soon as you get this guy tied up on the mat, he's a fish out of water. He's an excellent striker. He hits super hard, but once he's out of that striking realm, he has some serious problems. This is another spot where I feel like it's Sean early and Yayan late. So if Sean Soriano gets this thing done, it's probably a first-round knockout. If he doesn't get the first-round knockout, he's going to have to pace himself and avoid the grappling for a full 15 minutes. And I don't know if he's capable of that at the UFC level. So if this thing gets out of the first round, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Yayan drags him to the mat. And once this thing hits the ground, that's Yayan's world. I can absolutely see a submission coming through in that case. So I'd be looking at the violence here in the second fight of the night yet again. Flyweight matchup here, Cody Durden taking on Quileng Aori. Total here set at 2.5. The over is minus 200. The under is plus 170. And I'm going to flip it on this one. I like the over. Now, minus 200 is a little bit steep. I don't necessarily like that price tag on it. But I think both these guys are tough, they're durable, and they know how to grapple. And what that usually means is they're going to cancel each other out. We are either going to get a striking match where neither guy is capable of putting the other one out, or we're going to get a wrestling match. Now, both these guys could potentially sink a submission at some point throughout the fight, but most of the time they're going to just be focused on the wrestling transitions, trying to keep the other person down. I don't think either of them is so substantially better than the other that they'll be able to catch something crazy. So I would look for this thing to go to the judges' scorecards. Lightweight fight up next, Terence Mckinney taking on Faraz, and this one is a dead nuts under, folks. Total set at 1.5. Over is minus 120. Under is plus 100. And the only reason it's got me hesitant is because it's 1.5. Now, the fight doesn't go the distance. The under 2.5, those are spots that I think are absolutely solid here because Terence McKinney, this guy is vicious in that first round. Incredibly athletic, incredibly explosive. He comes forward with killer intent every single time. And all of his fights are basically taken care of in the first round. The one time he got into round 2, he looked like he had a complete adrenaline dump and he got flying knee knockout. So I think that, that was a UFC caliber fighter. It was on Dana White's Contender Series. You can maybe kind of forgive him from that, but he's just not defensively responsible. We've seen him tagged, we've seen him hurt, we've seen him rocked. He's just always been the guy that's been able to pour more on over his opponent. For Ziam, he's kind of the exact opposite. He likes to take his time. He's very technical, very calculated, but he's going to be able to find the holes in Terence McKinney's game. So if McKinney doesn't put Faraz Ziam away early, I do think Faraz Ziam is going to punish him for it late. The question is, at this 1.5, the bookies know what they're doing. They're making me pick the hard choices here. I'm going to say the under 1.5. I'll say that if this thing doesn't end in round 1, that 2 minutes and 30 seconds of round 2 should be enough to get the thing done. Women's strawweight fight up next. Loma Lukbunmi taking on Lupi Godinez. Total set at 2.5, and this is our classic women's MMA total. Over 2.5 is minus 320. Under 2.5 is plus 260. And let's be honest here, there's only one way this fight is finishing, and that's if Lupi has ground dominance. We've seen Loma Lukbunmi a bunch of times in the UFC. She's got awesome striking, but she's too small at this weight class. She's got good balance. She has good trips. Excellent Muay Thai striking, but she's not a finisher at this weight class, especially not at the UFC level. So because of that, I do think Lupi Godinez is going to be more than capable of taking the beating on the feet, and if the finish is happening, it's because Loma Lukbunmi gets taken down and she gets either submitted or ground and pounded because she's finally going to run into somebody who can expose the gaps in her grappling game. That's the only way this fight finishes, so because of that, I have to say over for the sake of the show, but if you want to take a shot at Lupi Godinez inside the distance by submission, something along those lines, that's not bad for a sprinkle. I just can't count on Loma Lukbunmi finishing in this spot, so since both of our fighters aren't contributing to the under, I gotta say over. Lightweight fight coming up next. Rafa Garcia taking on Natan Levy. Super highly touted prospect Natan Levy coming into the UFC. Undefeated UFC promotional debutante. Total set at 2.5. The over is minus 180. The under is plus 160, it looks like. Plus 150. I'm going to lean towards the over in this spot. Now, Rafa Garcia is a guy that honestly I think he could knock out Natan Levy. He's solid in his wrestling. He's very physically strong, defensively sound with his grappling, and obviously the guy has a brick of a chin. We've seen him in his last 2 UFC fights. This guy has no problem walking through whatever you want to throw at him in the striking realm. So I don't see Natan Levy knocking him out or finishing the fight or anything like that. The only way maybe he does it is by submission if he can get it to the ground. I have serious doubts as to whether or not he'll be able to do that, and if he does, whether or not he'll be able to keep it there. Rafa Garcia, I think he can knock out Natan Levy. Now, this kid's only 6-0 coming into the UFC level. This is a new realm for him. He's going way up the scale in experience level when fighting Rafa Garcia. So I do think that Rafa has a chance of maybe knocking Natan Levy out late, but he also only has 1 knockout on his UFC record. We saw him go for broke with the knockout last time, gassed himself out trying to get it, had nothing to offer the rest of the fight. I got a feeling maybe he'll manage his cardio a little bit more. Maybe that knockout manifests itself deep in the 3rd round or something along those lines, but if he's more patient, then this thing probably just goes the distance. So I'd say over 2.5 at minus 180 would be the way I'd look there. Featherweight fight up next. Pat Sabatini taking on Tucker Lutz. Total set at 2.5. Over is minus 175. The under plus 155. And this is a spot where absolutely I'm going to be looking for violence. Tucker Lutz is a slick striker. This guy is nasty on the feet. And Pat Sabatini is one of the most amazing grapplers we've seen come up in a long time. This guy combines his wrestling with his jiu-jitsu extremely well. He is very dangerous on the mat. Both these guys know that. So Tucker Lutz, he's a solid wrestler. He's going to probably look to use that wrestling in reverse, keep this thing on the feet, and bop up Pat Sabatini. If Pat can get this thing to the ground, though, he's going to be looking to sweep, to submit, and it's going to be on Tucker Lutz to keep himself safe. We saw what happened last time somebody volunteered to go to the ground with Pat, and it did not end well for them. So I do think both guys have more than enough finishing upside. We saw Pat Sabatini get hurt really badly on the feet in his last fight. I think Lutz can hurt this kid. There's violence on both sides. I wouldn't mind taking a shot on the under here for one of these guys to get the thing done. Main card time, bantamweight fight. Davey Grant taking on Adrian Yanez. Total set at 2.5. The over plus 115. The under minus 135. So the bookmakers are expecting this one to finish inside the distance. And honestly, I can't really argue with them. Now, The problem for me is my rule with betting unders is that we have to have not one but both of our fighters contributing to that under cashing. And we have kind of the opposite of that here. Grant and Yanez have been incredibly durable throughout their MMA careers. Both of them. You don't knock these guys out. Adrian Yanez, basically his whole style is take off round one, download the information from your opponent, and then wreck them in round two using that crazy power that the kid's got. And he just gets people out of there in the second and the third rounds when they can't hang with him anymore. Davey Grant on the flip side of this thing, they call the man dangerous for a reason. His striking is on point, his grappling is slick, and he just takes an absolute shit kicking and comes back and hits you harder than you hit him. That's how he gets the fight done as well. The problem with that for these is I feel like we're running into a car crash here. Both these guys can't just out-durable the other one, and if they're going to go for that type of a style of fight, somebody's going to go home in a body bag. I think Davey Grant with those big loopy punches is going to be open to the counter, and I also think that Davey Grant coming back after the war he had with Vieira is going to be a bad idea. Durability eventually gets cracked. You can't rely on that chin forever, and I think this is probably the spot where Davey Grant pays for making too quick of a turnaround. The flip side of this, though, is that Davey Grant's got unreal power, and Adrian Yanez is another guy that relies on his chin. If somebody is going to clip him and put him down, it's going to be someone with wild big power like Davey Grant that just clips him at a time where he doesn't see it coming. So I think the under is absolutely on the table in this spot. I don't really know that I want to pay minus 135 considering both guys have never been knocked out, but I'd have to say I'll look that direction. Jojo Wood, sorry about that. That's going to take some getting used to. Jojo Wood taking on Taila Santos up next. Over 2.5 is the number. Minus 340 to the over, plus 240 to the under. Can't argue with this one whatsoever. It's going over. Jojo has pillow fists. She's high volume, intense striking, but she doesn't finish anybody on the feet. Taila Santos, she's tough, she's durable, she'll take whatever Jojo's got to offer, and she's a grappler. She's going to look to make this thing a wrestling match. If she can get on top of Joanne, Joanne is not getting subbed in this spot. She's also tough enough not to get ground and pounded. I don't see her quitting on the stool or anything like that either. So whoever wins this fight, it's going over. Let's save a little bit of time. Bantamweight fight up next. Rani Yahya taking on Kang. Total once again set at 2.5 for this one. Over is minus 140. Under is even money plus 100. And this one's really tough because both these guys have finishing upside. You know, Rani Yahya can club and sub anybody in the division if he's on for that night. Kang, we've seen him TKO people on the mat, but he's more of a wrestler than anything, and that's kind of, I think, the way this will go. Rani Yahya's got some gas tank issues. We've seen this guy slow down. He's getting older. He's coming off COVID. There is window here for Rani Yahya to go belly up and just get taken out by Kang. The thing is, Kang might just look to wrestle, positionally sound, stay on top, don't give this guy a second to breathe. And if he does that, this thing is a dead nuts over. I'm going to have to lean over because of the durability both guys have shown. But don't be surprised if Rani Yahya ends up giving up something a little bit late and lets this thing finish. Co-main event, welterweight fight, Michael Chiesa taking on Sean Brady. Chiesa, the bane of my existence, a man who I simply cannot figure out for the life of me. Loses when I bet on him, wins when I bet against him. Total set at 2.5. The over is minus 120, juiced ever so slightly. The under is even money plus 100. And this is a spot where I'm thinking over. I definitely think that there's some recency bias on Chiesa because of that submission that he gave up in his last fight. Sean Brady is a BJJ black belt, but we see time and time again that wrestling guys tend to counter each other out and they end up having a striking match. So if neither guy can get a good foothold in the wrestling game, this thing's going to take place primarily on the feet. Or in the case of like the Chiesa and Neil Magny fight, maybe it takes place up against the cage. And if it does that, then it's definitely not going under. If Chiesa gives up some kind of a fluke submission, we've seen it before. It's totally possible. It's on the table. But I think Brady is more looking to control, use his hands, and get a fight decision won that way. I don't know that either of these guys is going to be giving up that bad submission spot, so I think this is going to end up being kind of a grindy co-main event. We probably see 15 minutes of it, so I'd say over 2.5 at minus 120 is the look. And for the main event, a women's bantamweight fight, Ketlen Vieira taking on Miesha Cupcake Tate. Total for this one is set at 4.5. The over is juiced to minus 155. The under is plus 135. And honestly, I'm extremely tempted on the under here. I haven't bet any of these totals so far this week. In fact, I don't know if I'm going to. But the one that I'm looking at here is the main event. Because we got a 5-round fight where Ketlen Vieira has shown time and time again that she has no idea how to control her gas tank. She goes for broke early. She's sloppy on the feet, but she has big power. She can club people around. She just has such a size advantage in this division. She's missed weight a couple times before. I'll be very curious to see how she looks on the scales tomorrow, because it could be a big advantage or disadvantage for her depending on how she comes in. But she can bully people around. She's got offensive submissions that are pretty solid. She's got that back control. She'll backpack people until they give up something. So Ketlen Vieira absolutely has finishing upside. Miesha Tate, on the flip side of this thing, she has shown in her recent fight that she is more than capable of finishing as well. Good gas tank, decent submission game, decent wrestling, improved striking. I do think there's opportunity for Tate to finish this fight, but I also think that probably comes later in the fight rather than sooner, because the way Ketlen Vieira comes out, she comes out hard and fast. She looks to end the fight early. If she can't do that, she slows down. Miesha Tate probably takes over and wins this thing via ground and pound a little bit later on in the night. So I think both women have finishing upside. They've both been finished before, so I'm not going to be shocked if either one of these women get the finish themselves or give up the finish to the other one based on the way this thing matches up. And I think getting plus money on this one for a 5-round main event doesn't sound half bad to me. That's the total takedown, folks. Make sure you comment down below with your favorite total bet for UFC Vegas 43. Tune in tomorrow for the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show. We'll see you there. Good luck on all your degenerate action, and let's roll.